What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Full Time MMA, and we're here today to break down UFC 282, which goes down this Saturday, December 10th at 10 p.m. Eastern. We're going to break down the main card that's going to be headlined by former UFC light heavyweight champion Jan Blachowicz taking on Magomed Ankalaev. But before we break down and give our predictions for this card, make sure you hit the thumbs up button, the subscribe button, and the notification bell. Don't be a baby back bagel biting beta male, because you know what time it is. It's full-time MMA. That's right, UFC 282 is going down this weekend. Headline UFC Light Heavyweight Championship on the line between Jan Blachowicz and Magomed Ankalaev. We've got a co-main event between Paddy Pimblett and Jared Gordon. Then Santiago Ponzinibbio was originally going to be facing Robbie Lawler, who was forced out of his fight due to an injury, so now he'll be taking on the great white Alex Morono. We've also got Darren Till on the card taking on Dricus du Plessis, which is going to be a banger, and Bryce Mitchell versus Ilia Topuria, the featherweights, to start the card off. It's going to be a great night of fights. We've got a vacant light heavyweight title on the line as Jiri Prochazka, the current light heavyweight champion, was forced out of his fight with Glover Teixeira due to a very bad shoulder injury that's going to take a lot of time to recover, including extensive surgery, so he had to vacate the belt, and now there's no champion. So these guys were bumped up from the co-main event to the main event to fight for this title, and these are two very worthy top contenders, ranked number 2, ranked number 3 in the world. Jan Blachowicz is the former champion. Magomed Ankalaev would be undefeated in his career if not for a literal last second, 1 second left on the clock submission by Paul the Bear Jew Craig. That's the only loss on Magomed Ankalaev's record. Other than that, he was even dominating that fight. So this dude is a monster Jan Blachowicz has on his hands. So without further ado, let's get into this breakdown and these predictions. All right. In the first fight, let's get my predictions up on the screen. Bam. You can see I'm going to be picking Magomed Ankalaev to get the W. Jan Blachowicz touched the UFC championship when he fought Dominic Reyes for the vacant UFC light heavyweight championship a little over 2 years ago at UFC 253. He was successfully able to defend that belt one time against Israel Adesanya when Adesanya stepped up 20 pounds and attempted winning belts in multiple divisions, but he did lose that fight. Jan Blachowicz lost his first title defense to a legitimate top light heavyweight contender, Glover Teixeira, when they fought. Jan Blachowicz was submitted in the second round of that fight. This will be the second vacant title Jan Blachowicz is fighting for, but I don't think it's going to go his way. As I said earlier, Magomed Ankalaev, he's a monster. He's 9-1 in the UFC, would be 10-0 if not for that last second submission, if not for those pesky kids. He's beat a lot of top guys such as Ian Cutelaba twice. He's beat Nikita Krylov, Volkan Ozdemir, Thiago Santos, and most recently a second-round TKO win over Anthony Smith. So for those reasons, I'm taking Magomed Ankalaev. 18-1, like he'll move to 19-1, I believe, after this fight. He's regarded by some as the best striker in the division. I think this fight is going to be a stand and bang match. I think that, it's going to be two very experienced strikers going at it. Both of these guys standing, so I think he might get a finish in this fight because I think it plays out on the feet, and he's going to be the better striker in there. And it's light heavyweights, and this motherfucker's dangerous. So I'm picking Magomed Ankalaev via third round TKO. Next, we've got the co-main event. Paddy the Baddy bumped up to the co-main event early in his career. This is only his 4th fight in the UFC. He'll be taking on Jared Flash Gordon. This is an interesting matchup because I'm going to be honest with you guys. Paddy the Baddy, he reminds me somewhat like Khamzat, but not like Khamzat. He's not as dominant as Khamzat, but he's got the hype of Khamzat very early into his UFC career, and it's not been proven yet. He hasn't earned it yet. Khamzat has since went and earned his hype. But Paddy the Baddy, man, if you look at these resumes, Paddy the Baddy is only 3-0 in the UFC, currently riding a 5-fight winning streak. All of those are finishes. Like I said, he's one of the fastest UFC rising stars. but he's getting bumped up to a co-main event of a pay-per-view right here, and he's going against legitimate competition here. He's taking on Jared Gordon, who's 4-1 in his last 5 UFC fights, winning all 4 via decision because he's a very good wrestler. He's a guy that's going to do what he needs to do to get the win, even if it takes getting a decision, even if the fight's not that pretty. But Gordon has been fighting against a lot higher competition a lot more often than Paddy the Baddy. So that's why this fight's tough for me to call, because although Paddy is on a tear and he's a rising star with momentum and hype on his side, Jared Gordon has fought and beat tougher competition in his career. I feel like Gordon should win this fight, so that's who I'm picking. Unless Paddy the Baddy pulls off a submission, which is possible. He's got good submission game. But Paddy hasn't beat anybody that's even sniffed the top 30 of the UFC. And Jared Gordon has legit experience against UFC veterans who have been near the top 15. So, for those reasons, I'm picking Jared Gordon to shut down the hype train. Paddy the Baddy, even if he does win this fight, the hype train will be derailed soon. The UFC can do a good job of getting this guy decent matchups and for a decent while, but just with his resume, man, it's going to be hard for Paddy the Baddy. And he's going to have to get like a Sean O'Malley timeline to where he has to have time to develop into one of the best fighters of the world. That worked for Sean O'Malley because he was so young when he came into the UFC, like 22 years old. He was able to take 5-6 years to get into his man body, train with the best fighters in the world, get legit UFC rounds and experience before he got to fighting top contenders and top co-main event pay-per-view spots. So Paddy the Baddy, he's a little older than Sean O'Malley was when he started getting his big fights and his tougher fights. But this is going to be one of those tests for Paddy the Baddy. If he beats Jared Gordon, the hype train continues. But from what I've seen in his career, just the caliber of competition, I'm not sold. I'm not buying in on the hype yet. I think Paddy the Baddy still has a lot to prove. And so I'm picking Jared Flash Gordon to win in the co-main event at UFC 282. Moving on, we've got Santiago Ponzinibbio taking on the great white Alex Morono. Alex Morono is stepping in for former UFC welterweight champion Robbie Lawler on short notice, who was forced out of this fight due to injury. Now Morono will be facing former top 10 welterweight in the world, Santiago Ponzinibbio. He's not even in the top 15 anymore, which surprised me. This fight will take place at a catch weight of 180 pounds due to Morono taking it on short notice. Ponzinibbio is only 1-3 in his last 4 fights. That's how he fell out of the top 15. He's lost his last 2 fights via split decision, so they were really close. And they were the really talented fighters, Jeff Neal and most recently Michel Pereira. Alex the Great White Morono is currently riding a 4-fight winning streak, including wins over Cowboy Cerrone, Mickey Gall, and most recently Matthew Semelsberger. Well, I think Morono was actually an underdog in that fight. I picked him to win, but somehow he was an underdog, which surprised me. This is a tough fight to call because I like Alex Morono. He's really good. He's talented. But I've got to give the edge to Ponzinibbio. Ponzinibbio, he's had success against higher level competition in his UFC career, including his 2 most recent losses, which were split decisions to current top 15 fighters. This is great matchmaking. It's a great test for Morono, even though it's on short notice. If he wins this fight, he proves he deserves a shot to fight in the top 15. So if Morono wins this fight, his next fight's going to be a top 15 fighter, but it's short notice. Ponzinibbio also needs to win this fight. He's been losing, but it's been to really good fighters, so his stock hasn't lowered very much. Ponzinibbio is still a top 20 fighter in the world. Even though he's on 1-3 in his last 4 fights, the dude's extremely talented and can bump back into that top 15 at any moment with a couple big wins. And I actually think Ponzinibbio gets the win here. I think this fight likely plays out on the feet where Ponzinibbio is likely to shine and just win likely a unanimous decision in this fight. I think this fight, Ponzinibbio will probably win a unanimous decision against Morono here. Props to Morono for stepping up. And I like the matchup. If he wins this fight, like I said, it's a great test, and he proves he deserves a top 15 shot. Stepped up on short notice and beat a legit welterweight staple. That would be a big, impressive victory for Alex Morono if he's able to step in and get it done. But as you can see, I'm taking Ponzi. Next, we've got Darren Till, former UFC welterweight title challenger, taking on Dricus du Plessis. Darren Till is 1-4 in his last 5 fights. How the mighty have fallen. He's currently riding a 2-fight losing streak to former middleweight champion Robert Whittaker and most recently top 5 contender Derek Brunson. That's one thing about his losses. Same thing with Ponzinibbio. He's literally fighting the best fighters in the world, so you don't lose much stock even though it's not very pretty for your record. He's fighting the best fighters in the world. Dricus du Plessis is 3-0 in the UFC, including 2 KO TKO finishes and most recently a unanimous decision against Brad Tavares. Du Plessis, he's very entertaining and he's got a very dangerous fighting style because he charges forward just swinging wildly, but he leaves his chin in the air. So it's dangerous for his opponent, but it's also dangerous for him. It's worked this far, but it's a bad strategy against superior strikers who can capitalize with devastating counterstrikes, such as guys like Wonder Boy or even a guy like Darren Till, who is one of the most badass strikers in the division for sure. So with that being said, I've got to pick Darren Till to win this fight. He's a striking specialist, more well-rounded, I believe, also with much more experience against much higher level competition than du Plessis. Du Plessis has never fought a guy in the top 15, while Till has been fighting top 5 contenders and former champions. There's levels to this shit, and Darren Till is fighting the best fighters in the world. So I've got to put stock into that, and I'm picking Darren Till to win this fight. If du Plessis wins, it's going to be by KO, which is possible. He can catch Darren Till, so that's there. But I'm picking Darren Till to win this fight. He can win by KO, TKO, or decision. So I think he's got more paths to victory in this fight, and he's also just a higher caliber fighter. We're going with Darren Till. Last fight on the card, we got the featherweights throwing down Bryce Thug Nasty Mitchell taking on El Matador Ilia Topuria. This is a battle of undefeated featherweights. Bryce Mitchell is 6-0 in the UFC, 5 of those being decisions, most recently against Edson Barboza and Andre Fili, very impressive. Ilia Topuria is 4-0 in the UFC, coming off of 3 KO TKO wins, most recently over Jai Herbert and Ryan Hall, also impressive. Not the same caliber, but still very impressive. For that reason, I'm picking Ilia Topuria to win this fight. He's already fought and finished Ryan Hall, and I think this fight's gonna play out similar. Very grappling heavy, jiu-jitsu heavy fight style and game plan. It's a tough call because Bryce Mitchell has fought and beat higher level competition in his UFC tenure, but I don't think it's a great matchup for him, for Thug Nasty, because Ilia Topuria knows how to be very defensive with his jiu-jitsu and also is extremely dangerous with his ground and pound in top position. So for that reason, I think Ilia Topuria is going to remain undefeated. I really like Thug Nasty Bryce Mitchell. He's a very entertaining character. This motherfucker's from the country, but he be rapping and shit. He's woke. Motherfucker's unapologetic. All the shit I like. You know what I'm saying? A bunch of different shit that makes him for a very entertaining character. So I fuck with Thug Nasty and I'm rooting for him here, but I believe Ilia Topuria is going to come in and get the win. Could be a decision, could be ground and pound, but I'm going with Ilia Topuria. So with that being said, those are my picks and predictions for UFC 282 this Saturday. I'm taking Magomed Ankalaev to be the new UFC light heavyweight champion, Jared Gordon to derail Paddy the Baddy, Ponzinibbio to defeat Morono, who's stepping up on short notice. Then we got Darren Till and Ilia Topuria. With that being said, let me know who you guys got in the comments. How do you see these fights playing out? What's your favorite fight on the card? Let me know down below. It is what it is, man. I'm out.